Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. There's a revolution happening in Africa, but no, not the kind you're probably expecting. This is a moral revolution that's pushing back against the woke Western elite and reshaping Africa's politics and culture in a powerfully conservative fashion. We're going to take a look at the latest heated exchange between one African leader and the president of France, how that clash represented a massive moral uprising going on in Africa, and what it all means for the rise of a new conservative age. African leaders are increasingly publicly standing up to European elites, telling them in no uncertain terms that their days of dictating political policies for increasingly conservative African nations are over. Case in point, the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Félix Tshisekedi, recently held a joint press conference with French President Emmanuel Macron in Kinshasa, the capital of the DRC, and fireworks broke out between the two. Now, if you're listening by podcast, I'll explain what they're saying to each other in just a moment.
Ça aussi, ça doit changer dans la manière de coopérer avec la France et l'Europe. Regardez-nous autrement, en nous respectant, en nous considérant comme de vrais partenaires, et non pas toujours avec un regard paternaliste, avec l'idée de toujours savoir ce qu'il faut pour nous et non pas pour eux.
Si le président Tshisekedi m'y autorise, je voudrais apporter un commentaire au commentaire. Je m'explique. Parce que le président a parlé de la France en répondant à la question. Quand un ou une journaliste française pose une question, ça n'est pas le gouvernement de la France. Et c'est bien comme ça. Mais il ne faut pas tout confondre. Parce que non, mais c'est pas une position de la France.
Je faisais allusion.
Parce qu'il n'y a pas, il y en a eu.
Je faisais allusion au propos de Le Drian. Lui, il est officiel français.
Oui, mais
le compromis à l'africaine, c'est Le Drian, c'est pas la journaliste.
C'est exact, mais ce compromis. Mais cette formule, président.
All right, again, so if you're listening by podcast, what happened there in that exchange is that Macron and Tshisekedi they're having this press conference. And Tshisekedi basically looked at Macron and said, you, the president of France and European leaders as a whole, you have to learn to see Africa in a fundamentally different way than you have throughout your colonialist past. You must begin to respect us and stop treating us and talking to us in a patronizing and paternalistic way, as if you're always absolutely right and we're always absolutely wrong. And you heard the people applauding there. Macron was clearly flustered by that. He was totally blindsided. He wasn't prepared to get challenged like that in a press conference. And so he tried to spin it by blaming this on some French reporter who asked a question earlier in the press conference that may have sounded condescending to the president of the Congo. And Macron said that, oh, this reporter doesn't speak for France. We have to make that distinction. Don't equate between the two. Now, if Macron thought he was digging himself out of a hole with that, he had another thing coming, because Tshisekedi fired right back, and that's when you heard them say, no. And he made it clear that he was explicitly talking about condescending comments made by France's foreign minister. He wasn't referring to a journalist. He can make that distinction on his own. He doesn't need Macron to, quote, teach him that. So this was clearly yet another public humiliation from Macron. I mean, you got to wonder how long he plans remaining as president of France. He just seems to be stepping into it week after week after week. But regardless, this exchange is but the latest in a trend that's absolutely exploding throughout the African continent as we speak. And that's a massive populist movement known as Pan-Africanism, where more and more African leaders are coming out, calling for the expulsion of European political and cultural influences from the colonial period, and are seeking instead to cultivate a uniquely African civilizational world. So as you can see, it's an incredibly vibrant movement, and one that Western globalist elites are beginning to get very, very concerned about, especially in terms of the attraction of the movement towards the rising neo-Orthodox civilizational state of Russia, shortly after Russia's world-changing summit with China. Delegations from 40 African nations attended an official conference entitled Russia and Africa in a Multipolar World. And there, Putin announced that Russia would be forgiving billions of dollars of African debt. And that forgiveness was explicitly framed by Putin as a gesture of solidarity and their mutual support for traditional moral values and the resistance against the insanity of the woke West. And that's the key. That's the key in many respects to understanding what's largely animating the formation of this new conservative world order. Wait until you see how our woke ruling elite are reacting to Africa's latest bans on LGBT identity politics, and waiting to see how African politicians are responding. But first, gang, you have got to click on that link below and try for yourself the new technology behind MyPillow 2.0. It's amazing. Mike Lindell's absolutely outdone himself with the new fabric temperature regulating technology that keeps you comfortable all throughout the night. You're going to absolutely love it. I know I do every night. And you get the same amazing savings as always if you use promo code Turley. Normally, classic MyPillow is $69.98, but if you use promo code Turley, you'll get that same classic MyPillow for just $19.98, and that applies to 200 products in their catalog. So don't wait. Click on that link below. Get the gift of comfort and warmth for yourself, for loved ones. Support one of America's most amazing patrons and get the best savings ever with promo code Turley. Click on that link below right now. The ultra-left editors over at the Washington Post published a scathing article this week excoriating the growing number of African nations who are cracking down, particularly on LGBT identity politics within their borders. They singled out the recent bill passed overwhelmingly by the Ugandan parliament that in effect bans LGBT identities from their nation. As I understand it, all but 2 members of the Ugandan parliament voted for it. Obviously, they want nothing to do with LGBT identity politics that have become so rampant in Western liberal nations. But of course, as the Post points out, it's not just Uganda. Of the 64 countries that criminalize homosexuality, 32 are in Africa, which the Post article absolutely laments. But the editors recognize that the old ways of just basically forcing Africa to comply with woke liberal values doesn't cut it anymore. And they're right. Here's a member of parliament in Ghana pushing back against the hypocrisy of the United States when it comes to their selective enforcement of LGBT values.
The hypocrisy of the US, where they call homosexuality a human rights issue in Africa, but yet they are doing business with countries where homosexuality is frowned upon. Over $1 billion of military hardware is sold to Qatar almost on a yearly basis. In Qatar, homosexuality is punished by death, not imprisonment. Why are they not threatening Qatar? One of the biggest trading partners of the United States government is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, it's punished by death. Why are they not threatening them? Why are they not threatening Russia? Then they come to Ghana and Africa and they want to come and threaten us with LGBTQ. The American government is a bunch of hypocrites.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Hey, U.S., where's your comparable outrage towards Saudi Arabia or China for that matter? Why does it seem you're always picking on Africa when it comes to LGBT stuff? You're always dictating rather than deliberating with us. Well, interestingly, this editorial in the Washington Post recognizes that there's currently a massive post-colonial, pan-African backlash against Western globalist elites. And they're going to get nowhere thinking they can dictate to African nations how they're going to live out their political and cultural lives. And all of this further points to the imploding influence of our woke Western elite. They've spent the last decades dictating to much of the world what it can and cannot do. And as you can see, that world is rising up and telling our ruling elite to shove it. In other words, what we're seeing in many parts of the world is starting to happen here at home. We too are telling our ruling elite that their days of dictating to us are over. And just as African nations are effectively expelling the ruling elite from their politics and culture, our turn to do exactly that from our nation is about to happen next. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to check out my latest video on the latest Democrat to switch parties, all as GOP supermajorities surge. You're going to absolutely love it, so make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.